Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons.
The 9th year of Chungi, third month and third day. But they have on the calendar Tim Elder and Greg Knoll, and for the second king of Cheonju, Hyung Jin-moon. I had to wipe snow off of my windshield this morning. What about you?
I had to scrape ice.
You had to scrape ice off of your windshield this morning. So we are still in this perpetual winter. Let's have hope.
It was a little depressing this morning, I must admit.
Let's have hope. But even the second king, he's saying that he loves he loves winter, and he
enough is enough.
But he is saying enough is enough. But I've noticed that in February or January, if we had even a little bit of snow, immediately the sand trucks would come out.
Yeah.
But they're not coming out.
They're done.
They've given up.
I think they took off their plows.
I don't know. Maybe they ran out of sand, or maybe somebody ran out of money to pay them. I don't know what, but they're not coming out. So this morning, as I was coming here, there was snow on the road, but there's nobody sanding it anyway. But it was all right. It doesn't seem to be a safety hazard. But it's 32 degrees and cloudy at the Cheongung Palace right now. I'm expecting to get up to 54 today, times of sun and clouds. And tonight, it's going to stay above freezing, 37 degrees. According to this, occasional rain. That's a welcome rule. We'd rather have rain rather than the alternative right now. Rain and drizzle. Tomorrow, cloudy with the rain tapering off, but also, so it's getting up to 46. It's supposed to, the daytime highs on average for this time of year, 60 degrees.
Yeah, we're well below.
Yeah, we've been well below for, and I was looking at where are we supposed to be? We're not supposed to be, but, on average, daytime high of 60 and nighttime lows of 37 is the historical average. We're pulling down that average, I tell you. We're pulling it down.
You can never accuse God of being in a rut. He's always mixing things up.
Yeah. Yes, he is. But you know what? When you take the average day to day, there is a steady upward line that goes until a certain day, and then it's actually, I think, around August 2nd, I think. That's when the historical average reaches its peak. And then from then, it's a steady line down. There's none of this if you take 50 years or however long they gather data for these averages. So that in that sense, he's very steady. Yes.
Yeah.
But we're talking about averages. So some years it's way above that, some years it's way below that. So this year, we're 10 to 15 degrees below average on many days. So we're pulling down that average.
Keeping the ticks at bay for now.
Yes.
That's the good news.
Yes, keeping the ticks at bay.
Those of us who've been bitten by a tick.
I have not been bitten by a tick.
That's amazing.
Maybe I have, but every morning I take that Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
Put that in my oatmeal. People say it ruins your oatmeal taste, but no, actually, because I also put a whole banana in the oatmeal, and bananas actually have a very, very strong.
They're a dominant kind of.
Dominant taste.
flavor,
Yes. So I don't taste the knotweed. It's a very good way of taking knotweed, I've discovered. Because if you take
it in capsule form.
Take it in capsule form.
Yeah, you don't taste it at all.
You don't taste it at all? All right, anyway.
Yeah.
That is the weather. So we will, I think, continue for a while in our below average temperatures. Let's go to the Rima. I'm in book of Mark this morning, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, verses 27 to 33. And they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, there came to him the chief priests and the scribes and the elders, trouble, and say unto him, By what authority doest thou these things? And who gave thee this authority to do these things? Do you have a license? Let's see your license to perform miracles. Let's see your license to save people's lives. Who gave thee this authority to do these things? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I will ask of you one question, and answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or of man? Answer me. Aha. And they reasoned with themselves, saying, If we shall say from heaven, he will say, Why then did ye not believe him? But if we shall say, of man, they feared the people, for all men counted John that he was a prophet indeed. And they answered and said unto Jesus, We cannot tell. And Jesus answered unto them, saying, Neither do I tell you by what authority I do these things. Checkmate. I love it. And, Father also really enjoyed playing with people. And Jesus, I think, was having a good time. I think he was having a good time with these scribes and chief priests who wanted to question his authority.
Yeah, that was a smart answer by the Lord.
And it was the authority of Jesus, and people also like to question the authority of the second king today, but really the authority is from God. It's from the authority is from God. It's from true Father, and we can see that because so much has happened. So much development has happened with the second king since he started his ministry in Pennsylvania 5 years ago. It's been just over 5 years now. It was in March of 2013 that he formed the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary because, of course, there are many churches in America that are not incorporated, storefront churches and so on, but he really wanted to do a serious ministry, and for that, some kind of legal entity was necessary in order to receive donations, to acquire property, and so on. And so he did take the step of forming a legal entity in 2013. And that was in March. Just to look at what has happened in the last 5 years is really incredible.
It's stunning.
Yes, yeah. He came to Pennsylvania, not really, because one reason was that he and Kukchinim wanted to work together, and Governor Cuomo of New York kind of encouraged Kukchinim to leave the state, passing a restrictive gun law then. And so Kukchinim, who was going to expand his production facilities to Orange County, New York, decided to come across the river instead to explore in Pennsylvania. And turned out there was this wonderful property that was, had been lying dormant, that had been kind of prepared for just this kind of a thing. And so, and they also noticed that, there was a strong religious and Christian spirit and foundation here that really they had not found in New York at all. Pennsylvania is a very special state, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not yet too familiar with the history of Pennsylvania, but as I understand, William Penn received this territory from the British monarchy, and he was a Quaker, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Okay, so he was also a religious man, and it was a big piece of land here, in Pennsylvania. So he, instead of keeping it all for himself, kind of divided it up among various religious groups.
Yeah, a strong foundation of religious groups that were heavily persecuted in Europe.
I think the Moravians especially may have settled this in this area.
And the Mennonites a little bit further south, south and west.
Well, the Moravians, we have a Moravian church here in the center of Newfoundland, and they are very proud of the fact that they say they started the religious Reformation before Luther. Before Martin Luther. At one of our Wonjon ceremonies, we had a gentleman, I guess from the Moravian Church, come and give us a briefing, kind of informally, along, to those of us who were sort of standing along the sidelines. We were doing Reformation before Martin Luther. So anyway, this, of course, many of the geographic names here reflect that religious background. Promised Land State Park, of course, and Lord's Valley, of course. There's a village not far from here called Jericho. The highest point in Wayne County is Mount Ararat. I don't know who owns it, but yeah, it's there. There are a lot of these biblical names here. Shows the religious and the Christian foundation here. And even when, a lot of people in America were having trouble saying Merry Christmas, they were saying it here, and they were even saying Happy Easter. So the people here are very clear about their religious foundation and background. So it's a very good environment for the king to have his ministry. And
it also, I think, has the highest concentration of gun owners pretty much anywhere in the country.
Yes, and veterans.
Extraordinary, and veterans as well. And as I was driving here this morning, I was also noticing the landscape. It's a very clean environmentally. The air is very clean. The water is incredibly clean.
There was a report yesterday that 95% of the world's population is breathing dangerous air.
That's right.
But we're in the 5%.
That's right. We are.
We're in the 5%.
It's true. It's
yes.
True. So I think God, and both Cooktonym and Youngtonym will attest that they really felt Father's hand in guiding them here.
Yes.
There were certain external factors, like New York was not friendly, but I think the bottom line was that Father really was directing the entire providence to bring them to this particular location.
Yes, and they've been working with True Father's authority, with the authority of God, just as Jesus did. But there are people who question that authority, just as the chief priests and the scribes questioned Jesus' authority, but you can see it in the fruits by whose authority he is doing this. Yeah.
And Father even said that even if my successor and heir is handicapped and crippled, you should not question that authority. You should give him your full support. This was back in 1982 or 81. I can't remember the exact year.
I think it may have been 83, I think. Because
83.
The reason I remember is that the second king was 4 years old then. And so I always wonder, what would he have done? What would people have done if Father had named a 4-year-old child as his heir and successor?
Right.
And by the way, I gave a message to people who are watching this video 200 years from now during the Korean service. Even if that happens, all right, you got to follow the kid.
Right.
Father said you have to receive the blessing through that child. All right.
That's
So we don't know who's going to be serving as king in the future, and it may be a 4-year-old child at some point. Don't get too excited. Just receive the blessing through that child.
I think the bottom line is whether people trust Father or not. Father, as the returning Lord, the Christ, the Messiah.
Christ.
Do you trust him or not to give his authority to an heir successor? And he did. He clearly, Father could not have been more clear about this point. 3 worldwide ceremonies, the bestowing of the grade 8 textbooks to the second king. And we're so fortunate that the king is not handicapped in any way. He is actually an incredible human being with a remarkable heart and love for humanity, love for his father, and the integrity to really propagate the culture of Cheonggil-guk.
Strong marriage,
absolute sex culture, peace police, peace militia culture. when you think and when you really sit down and contemplate the future generations based on what the king is doing on the foundation of our true Father, it is a glorious future. It is something that even the common man can understand.
Yes.
It's not a complicated thing. So I think Father in his great wisdom knew exactly the kind of heart that the second king has, and made the selection not casually. I mean, I'm just shocked that some people think, oh, it was just something that Father did, and it didn't work out. It's such an insult to our true Father, an incredible disrespect to our true Father. So I think we who are here, we have to really be careful every day and really show honor and respect true Father by serving and loving the second king.
And Reverend Lee talks about how many Family Federation people in Korea understand that that the Han Mother is going the wrong path, and they understand that when she goes to spirit world, she's not going to be with Father. And so when they are asked, well, okay, if Han Mother is not going to be with Father, then if you are following the Han Mother, where are you going to be in spirit world? And then they think about it and they say, okay, I guess at some point we're going to be forced to follow the king. But that's, some people say, yeah, well, I'll sin until the day before I die, then I'll repent. It's kind of the same kind of thinking that people have been excuse that people have been using for thousands of years. Yeah, well, when the time comes, I'll repent.
Dangerous way to live.
Dangerous way to live. We don't know when we will go. We don't know when Father will call us.
And, Jesus said, Lord, Lord, not, all those who say, Lord, Lord, will not be enter the kingdom.
That's right. That's right. Yes, we need to live in the kingdom here, in order to live in the kingdom in the spirit world. And things are happening very, very quickly right now, especially on the Korean Peninsula. And I see that domestically there are all kinds of things happening. Investigation, planes blowing engines, and people dying, and da. But what's providentially really important right now is what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, because Father's really when Father crossed the 30th parallel in 1950 on his way down from Pyongyang to Busan, when he crossed the 38th parallel, he put one foot in South Korea and one foot in North Korea, and he prayed, saying that I will erase this dividing line. And he has spent his life trying to get rid of that line, and the possibility of it being erased is now becoming very, very real. And so I want to maybe spend a lot of time on that this morning. So the Cheonsongyung reading that I have actually relates to that. Page 2048, we're in Book 13, Restoration of True God's Homeland. And he spoke a lot about this, but just want to focus on this quote this morning. Have you ever tried skipping even one lunch for the sake of the unification of North and South? What have you come here to do? To break through with Tongban activities. If a unified election of North and South Korea, initiated by the North before we are prepared, in parentheses by the editor, is proposed and carried out, the heavenly kingdom will fall down hopelessly. Do you know what kind of age is coming? You need to know this. So Father spoke a lot about the possible unified election of North and South Korea. And he, in other places, he warns that, if North Korea puts up its candidate, all North Koreans are going to vote for that candidate. Right? South Korea probably may have more than one candidate. And maybe some South Koreans will vote for the North Korean candidate. And so unless preparations are made, the North Korean candidate is going to win that election and become the president or the dictator of all of Korea. And so that is why he spoke that way in context of encouraging people to do the Tongban activities, which basically is a grassroots witnessing effort. Tong and Pan I think I've explained before, represent the very basic administrative units. You have for example, you have a village, but within the village, divide the village into several tongs, and then divide the tongs into several pans, so that one, for example, in the modern world, if you have one apartment block, one floor of that apartment block might be kind of a pan. That would be the smallest administrative unit. And during the military dictatorships, these administrative units were used to communicate government policies to the grassroots. They used to have a meeting every month, and each household was required to send one person to this meeting, and if you didn't, then you had to pay a fine. And some people just paid the fine. But that system is pretty well fallen by the wayside now. But that was Father's thinking when he spoke about Tongban activities, breaking through on the Tongban levels. It's basically a grassroots education and witnessing and education effort to prepare South Korea for the possibility that there will be this election that would cover all of the Korean Peninsula. That was, by the way, after World War II, when Korea was under. After World War II, that was the initial UN proposal for South Korea, for all of the Korea, that there would be an election covering all of the Korean Peninsula. But when the election workers tried to go into North Korea, they were blocked by the Soviet troops at that time. And so the election was only held in South Korea. And North Korea, of course, set up its own regime, centering on Kim Il-sung, the current dictator, is a grandfather. So Father's wish, and his fervent wish, was always for the unification of Korea. And of course, he is alive and active in spirit world today. And we can see that something here is he's been working, and something is coming to a climax now. President Trump yesterday spoke a lot about this, and yesterday morning on the King's Report, we just covered one story about how one newspaper in Korea reported that North and South Korea, when they meet, the two presidents are going to meet 9 days from now, it looks like, in the Panmunjom area, probably, I think, in the southern part of that area.
What part of Korea is that?
That's inside the DMZ.
Okay.
Inside, sometimes, the Western press sometimes mistakenly calls it a peace village, but A, it's not a village. No one lives there. And B, there's no peace there. So it's not a peace village. But that's where the Armistice Agreement was signed in 1953. And probably prior to the Korean War, it was a village. But it's not a village. And if you cross the line, you can get shot, and people have been shot.
Doesn't sound peaceful.
It's not a peace village. I wish people would stop calling it that. But anyway, North Korea and South Korea each have their own buildings on their sides of that, and the two presidents, or I don't know if actually Kim Jong-un is not the president. He's just supreme leader or whatever. I think he's the chairman of the military commission, and I think that's his official title. The president was actually in South Korea for the Olympics, but he's just a figurehead. So anyway, the two leaders, I guess you could say, Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, and Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, will meet on the southern side of the military demarcation line, that is southern side of the demilitarized zone. And there was a report yesterday that they may discuss a peace treaty or some kind of peace agreement to bring an official end to the Korean War. Because the Korean War ended in July 1953, with an armistice agreement, not a peace agreement. And of course, I made the point yesterday that, if a peace agreement is signed, then that basically eliminates the justification for having U.S. troops on the Korean Peninsula.
Which is their ultimate goal.
Yes.
To get rid of the United States presence.
Well, that's not their ultimate goal. That's their next goal.
Step,
yes,
yeah.
their ultimate goal is the communization of the Korean Peninsula, to unite the Korean Peninsula under a communist regime, that is a Pyongyang regime.
With the full support of China behind it.
And so now, yesterday, after that sort of unconfirmed report came out of Korea yesterday, President Trump confirmed it for us. He says, yeah, they have my blessing. What? Okay. Now, remember what happened with the omnibus bill? President Trump gave the Democrats everything they wanted. Of course, the Democrats said they didn't get 20%. We only got 80%. So anyway, he gave them pretty much everything they wanted. And in return, he got everything he wanted for the military, basically. Now, that seems to have been the trade-off there. All right, you want $600 billion? Okay, but I want $700 billion for the military. So that's how it sounds like. That's how the $1.3 trillion omnibus bill came about. And it looks like he's doing the same thing here. You want the Korean Peninsula? Okay, take it. Just get rid of your nuclear weapons. That sounds like what he's doing here now. And so Abe, of course, is here. Say what?
Not liking that idea.
Excuse me, Donald. What's going on? Don't forget us. I think the globalists who apparently have something on Trump now will not forget Japan. But I think the globalists too want North Korea to get rid of their nuclear weapons. Henry Kissinger published an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal last August where he said that getting rid of nuclear weapons in North Korea is not just important for protecting the U.S. homeland, but it's also very important for preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons to other East Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, he said, and some Southeast Asian countries will want nuclear weapons as well, if North Korea is able to get away with this and actually deploy real, a significant nuclear force. Right now they may have some warheads and stuff. They do have some warheads. They may or may not have miniaturized them. They may or may not have solved the problem of reentry without burning up. We don't really know. But anyway, they don't seem to have a real significant nuclear force that is deployed yet. But they will if things continue this way. And so if the United States allows that, Kissinger was saying in this Wall Street Journal article, then it's going to be, we'll have no way of stopping other countries from developing nuclear weapons as well. So the globalists also seem to want the denuclearization of North Korea. I think. Do you think so? Because they want China, and China doesn't want North Korea nuclearized. China doesn't want it. Why are you kidding me? No. I don't think Emperor Xi wants a nuclear North Korea.
The bottom line is it's really hard to verify whether a country has stopped its nuclear production.
So, yes, this is the problem, you see. Because
this is a huge problem.
Because North Korea, read my lips, will not denuclearize.
They won't. And same with Iran. I mean, look at the Iran. That was not at all successful in getting them to stop their production.
So this is the point, and so now we've learned that the CIA, the head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, apparently went to North Korea during the Easter weekend, that was April 1st, and met with Kim Jong-un, sat down with him one-to-one over Easter weekend. And so this is how apparently yesterday, this is reported by the Washington Post, but it looks like it's actually true based on what President Trump was saying yesterday. Looks like it's actually true. So things are moving, but maybe a little bit slower than originally, because until now we were told that Trump was looking to meet Kim Jong-un during May. Yesterday he said, or maybe early June. So maybe things are a little bit. maybe they're having, I don't know, waiting for the weather to warm up. I don't know.
Well, they have to see what happens at this meeting in 9 days from now, too.
Well, yes, but I think that's pretty well going to be scripted by the United States and China. I think. I think pretty well the United States knows what's going to happen. I think China knows what's going to happen. I think that meeting is going to be pretty well scripted. I think both the U.S. and China will keep their respective subservient countries on a pretty tight leash there. And you know, Moon Jae-in, he sort of goes back and forth. He wants to make himself look as if he's kind of a broker between power broker between U.S. on the one hand and China and North Korea on the other hand. So he's kind of pretending to be loyal to the United States. And so he's saying, well, we're not going to do anything at that meeting that has not been discussed with the U.S., or we're not going to do anything that U.S. hasn't agreed to, or something like that. So they will probably agree to a peace treaty, but they will not sign it, maybe. Okay? Probably, I would expect. But then Trump will probably sign a peace treaty with Kim Jong-un when he meets him. If it happens, if that happens.
What does that actually mean if they sign a peace treaty?
Well, it means that there's no more reason for the U.S. troops to be in South Korea.
Right.
Yes. And so the U.S. troops, if I were a U.S. soldier stationed in South Korea now, I'd start packing. I'd start packing now. I'd start packing now. Yeah. I mean, start sending stuff home now. Because
strategically, South Korea is incredibly important for Japan, for the United States presence, not just for South Korea. It's for the whole region, the Philippines,
China, Russia.
Yeah.
You know, these four countries have these four great powers, as they're called, have always been. The Russo-Japanese War was fought over the Korean Peninsula. The Sino-Japanese War was fought over the Korean Peninsula, so yeah, lots of wars have been fought over the Korean Peninsula, and even now, I think Russia right now is kind of worried. What's going on? Yeah.
Well, we're not even at the table.
We're not even at the table. Yeah, you're playing this game and we're not even there. Come on. So I'd like to see how Russia manages to get into the game here. They may have some plans on how to do that, and so that's one thing that could happen. But anyway, the current regime in North Korea, unless you have a regime change, there will be no denuclearization. And people in Washington know this. People in China know this, all right? People in Russia know this, the leaders I'm talking about. People in Japan know this. Everybody knows this. Nobody says it, but everybody knows this, all right? I'm not the only one who's saying this. Well, I might be, not too many people are saying it, but everybody knows this. Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his nuclear weapons. He says, well, yeah, I'll give up nuclear weapons if you guarantee my regime. But when he says guarantee my regime, he's not just talking about withdrawing U.S. troops from South Korea. He's talking about, he says, well, we're still threatened by the U.S. troops in Okinawa and Guam. So pull out of Okinawa, pull out of Guam. Okay, but you still have those nuclear weapons in the U.S. mainland. They're threatening us. You get rid of your nuclear weapons, then we'll get rid of ours. That's what Kim Jong-un will say. Ultimately, that's it. That will be his ultimate talking point. Yeah. U.S. gets rid of all its nuclear weapons, we'll get rid of ours.
And we can certainly trust that they will follow through with that.
Yes. So
really, the next step in this peace treaty is also the beginning of cultural exchange. That's part of the strategy of warming the ties between the two countries.
Yeah. Of course, there have been cultural exchanges now, or sort of going on since the Olympics in February, and they even had a K-pop group go to, or a couple of K-pop groups, I think, go to North Korea and perform there in front of Kim Jong-un and so forth, and also China now has sent its envoy to North Korea to make sure that it's in control of what's going on. China must be kind of worried right now because things are kind of getting out of control, I think. Things are kind of going faster than
losing their grip.
Yeah, anyone had expected. They want to make sure that they know what's going on. But the thing that I'm kind of expecting, worried about, what if this Trump-Kim meeting doesn't come off? What if, like President Trump said yesterday, either we'll have a great meeting or we'll have no meeting at all. So what happens if there's no meeting at all? Well, and I think in that case, President Trump will be able to say to China and to the world, hey, look, I even offered them to withdraw U.S. forces from Korea. I offered to let Kim Jong-un take over the whole peninsula in return for denuclearization. But he refused. He wouldn't do that. So now there's only one thing left, and that's a military strike. Yeah, I think that would be a very convincing argument then, don't you think? So Trump can say to the world, you have to choose. Do you want a nuclear North Korea? If not, then support us on this this military strike against North Korea. So all this, the charm offensive, whatever, peace offensive, whatever they're doing, it's all a cover. It's all a cover, I think, to what's actually going on, and that is that the situation in Korean Peninsula is really coming to a head now. Father's bringing it to a head, and Korean Peninsula will be unified very soon now, either peacefully or militarily. Because everybody knows that the only way that you can have denuclearization is by regime change.
And China might even support that.
As long as they can, so China wants a buffer, wants to maintain a buffer. Because right now North Korea acts as a good buffer between China and U.S. forces in South Korea and Japan. So China definitely does not want U.S. forces to be stationed north of where they are now, north of the DMZ, what's currently the DMZ, and may soon not be a DMZ. The demilitarization of the demilitarized zone, this is kind of the irony that's going to happen, because actually the demilitarized zone of Korea is one of the most highly militarized areas in the world.
Couldn't they just move that line between China and North Korea if there was a unified Korea under a free Korea? If China was concerned about a buffer, couldn't they just create a buffer between China and North Korea?
Well, so China will not want U.S. troops stationed, as I say, north of what's currently let's say north of the 30th parallel, approximately. North of the 30th parallel. Whereas, I always thought that actually, if South Korea doesn't want U.S. troops, we could also always station them in North Korea, I thought. Because they could use the economic boost. But China will not like that, and so it will have to be. There'll probably have to be an agreement with China not to have a U.S. forces up there. But something could be worked out with China, where.
I think you're right. I think nobody in the world wants North Korea to be fully nuclear.
Right. Yeah.
That could be the unifying principle.
Yeah. But either way, whether it's unified peacefully or militarily, I think there will be this election that Father's talking about in this Chun Sung-kyung passage this morning, and that is what do you call it? What does he call it here? Unified election of North and South Korea is the way it's translated here. In other words, you vote for president, and then the North Korean candidate, you have the North Korean candidate and the South Korean candidate or candidates, and the vote in South Korea is divided. North Koreans vote for one person, and so the North Korean wins. This is what the Father was always concerned with. So 30 years ago, he was talking about this this is in 1990, I guess, in these words here. Anyway, in volume 200 of Father's collected sermons, and I looked at the original speech, and in that speech, where this quote is taken from, Father goes into great detail about how the North Koreans will conduct this election. They'll send down teams of propagandists and organizers, and they'll send in money, he said. And what if they give $100 to $100 each to 100,000 voters, for example, Father said, And he said at that time it was Kim Il Sung was the leader. And he says Kim Il Sung will certainly borrow that much money in order to buy the votes of South Koreans, or if not $100 and $1,000 each, even $1,000 each, he'll borrow enough money to pay off 100,000 voters $1,000 each. He was saying. That's for the North Korean regime. It would definitely have that much value, and I'm sure China would oblige, lending them, maybe even donating that much money, so that the North Korean candidate could win this kind of a unified election. Things are happening. Things are happening right now, and I'd like to go into some of the news stories this morning, because this, I'm going to ignore all the domestic stuff. You can read about that yourself. McConnell shuts down a bill to protect Mueller. Barbara Bush is dead. Starbucks closing 8,000 stores for racial bias at Education Day. It's all nothing, all right? Starbucks closing 8,000 stores, it has nothing to do with anything. Because Father's worried about Korea right now, all right?
Well, God is judging these very liberal corporations.
Yeah. But anyway, let's go to the story on Pompeo going to North Korea. This man, he's a hawk on Korea. I've been working on this a long time, and it's coming to a head. CIA Director Mike Pompeo met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un over Easter weekend in an effort to lay the groundwork for a summit between Kim and President Trump, Fox News has confirmed. Pompeo's trip, which was first reported by the Washington Post, came to light hours after Trump told reporters that the U.S. and North Korea are holding direct talks at extremely high levels in preparation for what would be an extraordinary meeting following months of heated rhetoric over Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. Though the White House did not initially comment on the reports, Trump acknowledged the meeting in a Wednesday morning tweet saying it went well. Mike Pompeo met with Kim Jong-un in North Korea last week. The meeting went very smoothly and a good relationship was formed. Details of the summit are being worked out now. Denuclearization will be a great thing for the world, but also for North Korea, he tweeted. But I want to warn, again, the American administration and press, North Korea is not raising the white flag. Don't think that this was all the result of President Trump's bluster and criticism of Kim or even the UN sanctions. I don't believe it was. I think right now Kim Jong-il feels that he has won. He has won the war.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he's coming into these talks as a victor. All right? He's coming in. He thinks that he has won. And he thinks he's won because of the election of Kim Jong-un. Moon Jae-in, I'm sorry. The election of Moon Jae-in. The election of Moon Jae-in, I think, for him was basically a sign that the game is over. And, because Moon Jae-in now has placed what they call Chusapa in South Korea, in the Blue House, in the presidential staff. Chusapa means that these are people. It's the Juche ideology faction would be the translation. Juche ideology, of course, is the guiding ideology of North Korea. It's their version of communism. Kim Il Sung's a version of communism. So we have people in the South Korean presidential office who follow Kim Il Sung's ideology. Okay? So for Kim Jong-un, that was game over. And now the media in South Korea is pretty much all leftist, especially the televisions, broadcast stations. Really the only place where real conservatives' opinion can exist in South Korea now is on YouTube and in other social media outlets.
Which I'm sure is being censored like it is here.
Not yet. I guess the SPLC doesn't speak Korean, fortunately. the Southern Poverty Law Center, those 10,000 censors that YouTube has hired from SPL. I think they're still studying Korean, and they haven't learned it yet. So it's not nearly as censored as the United States on YouTube. Fortunately, that may start in the future. Once the SPLC gets around to teaching them Korean, but not yet. So that's still, you have the conservative opinion there, but by and large, the media in South Korea now is leftist. And what my wife discovered when she went to Korea end of last year was that the sort of her relatives and friends that she spoke with don't have the realization or the consciousness that they are being led in a sharply leftward direction. Really? Moon Jae-in's leftist? Wow, I didn't know that. It's kind of a comment she heard to her astonishment. And so she was there, of course, preaching the word, preaching the word. But so things are
Short memories,
and people are so involved in their daily lives that they don't really bother. It's just like people walking around with their heads buried in their smartphones,
Yeah.
and they don't know that they're about to get hit by a car. It's basically the same principle. People are so short-sighted in their outlook that they're not aware of their surroundings. They're not aware of what's going on around them. They're not aware of the fact that their country is being hijacked or has been hijacked.
And my understanding, the public schools are very much like here, where there's a certain bias being taught for the last 15 years
20
or
years,
so.
more than that, yeah. The teachers' union, the dominant teachers' union in South Korea is very leftist, and they even teach that the primary enemy of South Korea is the United States. That is the primary threat, security threat to South Korea comes from the United States. This is what children have been taught.
Now, was it common knowledge in South Korea the fruit of communism in North Korea, meaning starvation, absolute, no ability to express your thoughts, and you get sent away if you don't agree with the party line? I mean, that's what we see all the time here in the West, right?
Yeah.
We see the absolute disaster of North Korea. Is that not?
Yeah, it is, and
common knowledge?
for that reason, I think many, perhaps even majority of South Koreans do not want unification, because it would be a huge burden on the economy, on the South Korean economy. The whole idea of unification is not so popular especially among young or even middle-aged Koreans today. It's mostly about, I think, older Koreans, but still, it's kind of kind of the sort of the traditional doctrine of South Korean regimes to unify the peninsula. But as long as North and South remain separate, all right, then accepting the sort of more socialist view is popular, and they say they look to European socialism, European sort of, the West European, say Sweden, for example, Sweden, for example.
Except Korea.
Shall we go there?
Korea doesn't allow any Muslims in at this point, or the immigrants.
Actually,
it's a growing.
Yes, okay. Islam is growing. It's
Islam
not,
growing.
I mean, David Wood's 3 stages of Islam. They're basically still in the first stage, where Muslims are in the minority. So Muslims are a religion of peace, but the number of mosques in Korea is growing.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it is growing.
Maybe Sweden is the model.
Sweden is the model. But the idea that, and this was something that when I was working on the international desk at Segeilbo, some of my reporters were trying to convince me that one of the important functions of government is to distribute wealth. And this is very popular among South Korean intellectuals, reporters, students, many intellectuals, and not just intellectuals, but also maybe kind of the middle class, getting a better function of government is to bring about a more equitable distribution of wealth. So,
wow.
Yeah. That's and I say, no, we could be like some of those small countries in Europe, like the Netherlands, for example, or people talk that way. We could be like Netherlands or Belgium, one of those Netherlands, Belgium. They're between two large countries. They're between Germany and France and Britain, and they seem to get along well. Why can't we be like that? With everybody sharing equally and this kind of thing. Living happily ever after. Well, anyway, let's see what else is this. Trump says, Trump, who welcomed Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to his Florida resort Tuesday, said 5 locations for the potential summit are under consideration. The president would not disclose the sites, but said the U.S. was not among them. I heard elsewhere that Hanoi is one of the places, and Singapore is one of the places. I was sort of wondering what would be a good place. One good thing might be to have just Air Force One fly into the North Korean airport, Sunan Airport there, that serves Pyongyang, and have the Air Force One sitting there and say, okay, I'm here, come on board, and bring Kim Jong-un on board the Air Force One, that would be good, I think. That would be, because meeting with North Korea, really the what they call the visuals are important, and
that's why that will never happen.
That's why that will never happen. That's why I wish it would happen. But but I hope they realize that's and another important. Who's going to enter the room first? All right, or actually important. Who's going to enter the room last? Because the one that enters last is the one who's in the senior position. Yes, the junior position enters first and is waiting for the other guy to enter.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
I hope somebody in the White House is or in the CIA headquarters or State Department somewhere is sitting down and looking at these things.
Maybe you should tweet something.
I should tweet something. And when the peace talks were held at Panmunjom in the 1950s, who had the bigger flag? Who had one side had a flag with a base that had two. Or I guess just one stage at first, and then the other side brought one with two sort of stages, and then they brought 3 stages. This kind of thing went on.
It's nice that we're such mature adults in these meetings.
In 1970s when Kissinger was trying to sell out South Vietnam. In those negotiations, they spent months and months and months trying to agree on the shape of the table.
Yeah, I think I heard about that.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if those kinds of negotiations are going to go on this time, but we'll see. Well, this is an important statement here. We'll either have a very good meeting, or we won't have a good meeting. Trump told reporters, and maybe we won't even have a meeting at all, depending on what's going on. But I think that there's a great chance to solve a world problem. So he's saying that either we'll go in there with a good chance of getting what we want, or we won't go to the meeting at all. And
so I think the meeting's going to be on equal terms at least.
Well, so I think what Trump is saying is that we're going to go in there with North Korea being willing to do something about denuclearization, or we're not going to go at all. Of course, North Korea will promise denuclearization. Sure. They have no problem promising.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have no problem. They've done that.
So, yeah.
They've done that before. But also, Trump is saying, hey, we're not going to make the same mistakes as in the past. So we'll see how he does with the art of the deal this time. Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Verification is always the key point, and yes. How do you verify when the regime is totally secretive?
Yes, and when they have nuclear weapons hidden in mountain caves and so forth, how can you really verify?
Right.
And I think the answer is that you cannot. The answer is that the only way that you're going to achieve denuclearization of North Korea is through regime change.
Yeah, maybe that, like you said, maybe that's Trump's ultimate goal is to expose that,
right.
and then justify an attack.
Right. The president did not answer shouted questions about whether he has spoken with Kim. Kim's offer for a summit was initially conveyed to Trump by South Korea last month. And basically, South Korea is acting as the errand boy here. Moon Jae-in wants to pretend that he's some kind of a peace broker, but he's basically an errand boy. And the president shocked many when it was announced that he had accepted. U.S. officials have indicated over the past 2 weeks that North Korea's government has communicated directly with Washington that it is ready to discuss its nuclear weapons program. Sure, yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah, we'll talk about it until the cows come home. Abe, who has voiced fears that short and medium-range missiles that pose a threat to Japan might not be a part of the U.S. negotiations, praised Trump on Tuesday for his bravery in agreeing to meet with the North Korean dictator. Well, that's pretty much all that Abe can say publicly. But I'm sure privately he's saying, Donald,
we're pretty close to North Korea.
What about those missiles that are flying over our head every day? Exaggeration, I'm sorry. I'd like to commend Donald's courage in his decision to have the upcoming summit meeting with the North Korean leader, Abe said. Trump also confirmed that North and South Korea are working to negotiate an end to hostilities before next week's meeting between Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The meeting will be the third inter-Korean summit since Korea's 1945 division. North Korea has long sought a peace treaty with the U.S. to formally end the 50 to 53 Korean War, but it is unusual for the North to seek to broach the issue directly with South Korea rather than Washington. That's true. North until now has said, hey, we're only going to deal with the U.S. because we're the only legitimate government on the Korean Peninsula, so we don't know who you guys are. Just like someone else saying, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. The armistice was ended by the armistice that ended the fighting was signed by the United Nations Command, the U.S.-led forces in the conflict, North Korea and China. South Korea was a member of the UN Command, but was not a direct signatory. I'm sure Syngman Rhee in Spirit World right now is really angry about that sentence because normally South Korea should have been a signatory also to the armistice, because if you say that South Korea was a member of the UN Command, yes, but also North Korea's armed forces were subsumed under China as well. So if North Korea signed, obviously South Korea should sign, but Syngman Rhee refused to sign. He refused to sign. He was asked to sign, and he refused, saying, no, we're not going to end this war. We're going to continue fighting. And this, by the way, is the reason that one of the reasons that the U.S. has limited South Korea's missile capabilities over the years. You can only have a range of so much because they were afraid that, and a lot of the South Korean ammunition also is held by the Americans because they don't want, they've had concerns about South Korea
wanting to take too much military charge.
Take the initiative, yes.
In terms of attacking the North?
Yes. And, there was, for example, when President Chun Doo-hwan, during a visit to Burma when was that? I guess it must have been during the 1980s, when pretty much his whole cabinet was wiped out in a bombing attack by North Korea. They were waiting for him. His cabinet was all, he was on an official state visit to Burma, and his entourage was there, lined up, foreign minister, which minister, this, and the President Chun Doo-hwan was on his way in his limousine, and I guess the bomb went off prematurely. It was a North Korean bomb. It turned out to be later, and a lot of his cabinet was killed in the bombing, and obviously was intended to kill the president himself. And so on the plane on the way back, of course, he immediately returned to South Korea in a plane, and a U.S. Envoy of, I've forgotten who it was, but got on the plane with him and spent the entire flight trying to convince him not to attack North Korea. So there have been tense times, So yeah, South Korea has never been a signatory to the, even to the armistice agreement. And they don't, I don't think South Korea would agree with this statement that South Korea was a party to the agreement as a result of the fact that it was a member of the UN Command. That's, I think, a statement that, a sentence that's coming out of the U.S. Pentagon, I guess. Trump said Tuesday that the two Koreas have my blessing to discuss the end of the war. Oh, that is that's the big statement that we have here. Because yesterday I was thinking, well, maybe Moon Iowa got this wrong, but no. Trump said, yeah, they have my blessing. And in fact, he went on in his tweet saying, hey, they're only discussing this because of me, right? I mean, some of his tweets yesterday.
Classic Donald.
Classic Donald, yes.
Well, I think Donald, to his credit, has the ability to show the world where the dirt is, and he does play these hands in such a way where people expose themselves and their intentions. So this, I think, is another one of those where North Korea will expose itself through these talks.
Donald repeated Abe's tweet in Japanese, I noticed. I hope I had someone translate it. Yeah. Abe tweeted something, and President Trump just retweeted it yesterday.
In Japanese?
Yeah, in Japanese, yes.
I guess for all those Japanese Americans, that's, probably a lot of Japanese are following Donald's tweets.
Yes. I mean, if Abe calls him Donald, we can call him Donald.
That's unusual, isn't it, for a Japanese leader to call the president by the first name?
It is. But he's desperately trying to show that he's a friend. And Japan is a friend. I think we used to talk about the special relationship between the United States and Britain, UK. But I think that special relationship has kind of shifted over to U.S. and Japan now. And I think Abe can be assured that Japan's interests will be protected during this. I was looking for, I guess it wasn't a tweet where he said that all this was due to him. It must have been a statement that he made to the press. Yeah, he's talking about the revolution in California. And who cares about that? We only care about the Korean Peninsula.
Did all of this come about because of Trump's hardline stance before the Olympics?
I don't think so. I think it's come about because Kim Jong-un has convinced himself that he's won the game. He's the victor, and so he can afford to be magnanimous, to offer the United States. I think Kim Jong-un was surprised when he offered the United States a meeting and Trump was agreed. Because Trump thinks that all this is because of his hard line. And the U.S. media think that, or at least U.S. media think that as well. The Democrats think that as well. I guess are grudgingly thinking that as well. But I think they're wrong. Because North Korea is one thing about North Korea that we need to know is that it is they survive on pride. That's what they eat for breakfast. That's their breakfast of champions, pride. And they will starve to death rather than have their pride tarnished. So this idea that they've been forced by Donald Trump's hard line into raising the white flag is just wrong. That's just wrong. Yeah,
it makes sense.
They're coming in here. They're coming into this meeting as the victors, So, and I just hope that somebody in the CIA recognizes that. No reward for North Korea without irreversible denuclearization, says Pompeo. This was about 6 days ago. So this was after he came back from North Korea. So let's look at this article again, now knowing that he was making this statement after having spoken with Kim Jong-un. North Korea should not expect rewards from talks with the United States until it takes irreversible steps to give up its nuclear weapons. President Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, CIA Director Mike Pompeo, said on Thursday. So that's one thing he failed to disclose to the Senate, didn't he? Oh, yeah, I was just in North Korea. He failed to mention that. Pompeo said the historical analysis was not optimistic when asked at his Senate confirmation hearing if he believed North Korea would agree to dismantle its nuclear program. He said that in past negotiations, the United States and the world had relaxed sanctions too quickly. It is the intention of the President and the administration not to do that this time, to make sure that before we provide rewards, we get the outcome permanently, irreversibly, that it is that we hope to achieve. Pompeo said, "It is a tall order, but I am hopeful that President Trump can achieve that through sound diplomacy," he said. Trump has said he plans to meet North Korea. Okay, we know about that. He thanked China for, okay. So, yeah, after Pompeo's visit, we see that President Trump has been speaking well of China. Saying he thanked China for its help in trying to resolve the crisis. They've been really terrific at helping us get to some kind of settlement, Trump said. So this is last week, Thursday, that he's saying this. So we can see now why he's all of a sudden so nice to China. Meetings are being set up right now between myself and Kim Jong-un. I think it will be terrific. I think we'll go in with a lot of respect, and we'll see what happens, he said. Trump also said trade negotiations between Washington and Beijing were going well. Pompeo said he was optimistic. He was optimistic a course could be set at the Trump-Kim conference summit for a diplomatic outcome with North Korea, but added that no one was under any illusions that a comprehensive deal could be reached at that meeting. He brushed aside concerns that the administration's move to modify a nuclear deal with Iran could make an agreement with North Korea more difficult. He argued Kim would be looking to his own interests, including the country's economy and the sustainment of his regime, not other historical agreements.
Sustainment of his regime, I think, is number one.
Well, that is number one. It's number 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5,
yeah,
all the way down to 10 for North Korea.
That's why the military option is really the only legitimate option.
Eventually, it's regime change has to take place in North Korea.
The only way that can happen is through military action.
If you're going to actually denuclearize, I mean, if you say, go ahead, all right, well, we lived with Soviet missiles for a long time and still live with Chinese missiles. Another nuclearized company, this is what China actually sometimes says to the U.S. I mean, you didn't have any problem with the Soviet Union. You didn't attack the Soviet Union because they had missiles. Why are you so upset about North Korea, such a small country with, not even a significant nuclear force? Of course, the difference is that we're trying to prevent a proliferation, and we would have also prevented the Soviet Union from getting its nuclear power if we could have, except somebody spilled the secrets in the 1950s. But even Kissinger says that allowing North Korea to keep its nuclear weapons would be disastrous for the United States and the world. So there seems to be a pretty strong consensus, even among globalists, that cannot be allowed. So probably then
it's a little bit of a loose cannon. The dictatorship there is not at all predictable. Yeah,
but also if you allow North Korea to have it, then everybody else will want one.
Well, they do, right? They all do want it.
Yeah, just like the teacher says, I hope you brought enough of those to share with the class. If one person wants it, everybody wants to want it. Regime change one way or another will maybe be the only option, but I don't know when that's going to happen. Well,
like you say, things are happening quickly now.
Yes, so. They are happening quickly. But, we'll have to wait late June or May. If this happens at all, yeah. Wow, I was going to take a break, but we're already getting close to the top of the hour, quitting time. Let's, all right, we'll cover a few other things, all right, that are also in the news. Something about a plane breaking up. Yeah. Makes you, well, I guess airlines are still the safest way to fly. This, apparently the pilot was a former military Air Force pilot who did very well in bringing this plane down, this Southwest Airlines plane down. The pilot who safely landed a stricken Southwest Airlines flight on Tuesday got her first flying experience in the U.S. Navy, touching down F-18 fighter jets at 150 miles an hour on aircraft carriers. So, okay. An explosion killed one passenger and nearly sucked another out of a shattered window. One of the first female fighter pilots in the U.S. Navy, Schultz calmly told air traffic control that part of her plane was missing and she would need ambulances on the runway. So we have a part of the aircraft missing, so we're going to need to slow down a bit, Schultz told the controller. Many of the 144 passengers sang her praise on social media after Schultz thanked them for their bravery as they left the plane. Pilot Tammy Jo was so amazing. She landed us safely in Philly, said Amanda Borman on Instagram. Passengers identified Schultz as the pilot. Southwest Airlines declined to name the crew of the flight, and Schultz was not immediately available for comment. Authorities said the crew did what they were trained to do. So anyway, yeah, that's a good story. And McConnell shuts down bill to protect Mueller. Barbara Bush is dead at 92. I like this, like you said, I like this article on Starbucks, the left getting some of their own medicine.
Yeah, and Facebook could face billions in fines over facial recognition features.
Yes,
so,
why don't you tell us about that?
Things can change very quickly for these monopolies, and Starbucks is a monopoly, I would say. Every corner in New York City has a Starbucks on it, so overnight things can change for these kind of companies that have been very much bullies in a lot of ways, limiting free speech and forcing people to believe in certain things. And Facebook,
you know what I noticed a couple days ago? Wells Fargo said, hey, it's not up to us to set gun policy. That's not the job of a bank.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, Wells Fargo.
Yeah. Stay out of it.
Yeah, you.
Stay out of it. You're a banking institution, for crying out loud.
Bank of America and the Citibank want to set gun policy, but not Wells Fargo. Isn't that great?
That is a good thing.
Yes. I'm sorry. Continue. Yes.
Yeah. So Facebook, the king of kings in the social media outlet could literally could go bankrupt over this because it's a class action lawsuit that's emerging through people with no understanding that this was happening. They were having their facial, their retina scanned, their face scanned, and all sorts of privacy issues are being looked at here.
Oh yeah, through the cameras on the computers.
Camera, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't researched, but the point is that the mighty can fall. And if they're not in alignment with God's dispensational will and moving things toward a globalist perspective or a centralized control, then things can turn around very, very quickly. And we need to see that with YouTube as well, because YouTube is also out of control. We need to see competition in the social media platforms. So I think this is an opportunity for other companies to step into the arena and create healthy competition, so that if a company like Facebook or YouTube is not doing things that you agree with, you have the ability to freely move to another company.
Let's look at a story about that here on CNN Tech. Facebook is once again under fire, but this week the company is taking flack for its facial recognition software, not the geopolitical data scandal. A U.S. federal judge on Monday ruled Facebook will have to face a class action lawsuit that alleges the social media giant used facial recognition on photos without user permission. Its facial recognition tool scans your photos and suggests you tag friends. Yeah, I remember, what was it? When I suddenly got all these messages from Facebook showing all these photographs that had me in them and saying, do you want to tag yourself?
Right.
And of course I ignored it. The company has been using the tool since 2011 when it launched Tag Suggestions, which suggests who to tag in an uploaded photo. The lawsuit filed in 2015 claims this violates the Illinois law on privacy of biometric identification technology. U.S. District Judge James Donato ruled in San Francisco federal court that the plaintiff's claims are sufficiently cohesive to allow for a class action lawsuit to resolve the dispute. Okay, so yeah, so potentially billions in fines, I guess, or fines or
and payouts.
Payouts.
And,
Yeah, and so their stock, I think, is also is going down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the stranger.com. Facebook could lose billions in class actions. Okay. And in California, San Diego County is now joining the lawsuit against the state of California about the sanctuary for immigrants. San Diego, of course, being in the southernmost part of San Francisco, I think, isn't it? Of California.
Yeah. Borders
along the Mexican border.
Yeah.
And so they're very concerned about this. So that's interesting. And so President Trump actually had a tweet saying about a revolution in California, he said, going on against these leftist open border policies. So things also changing there. Okay, I can get this.
Yeah, I mean, if you have one weak link in the chain, that causes a problem for national security. So if one country decides to have open border, one state
yes.
decides to have open borders, it affects all of us.
But Governor Brown, Jerry Brown of California, is refusing to station any of the National Guard along the border. He's saying, this is what he said when he first announced that we're not going to be enforcing any domestic laws, immigration laws with these people. Instead, we're going to be working against transnational crime. Here's Donald J. Trump's tweet here. There is a revolution going on in California. This is 2 hours ago, so he's up early. So many sanctuary areas want out of this ridiculous crime-infested and breeding concept. Breeding, is that really the word he wanted? Breeding concept. Jerry Brown is trying to back out of the National Guard at the border, but the people of the state are not happy. Want security and safety now. All caps now and an exclamation point.
Are people reading his tweets before he sends them out?
Like I say, sometimes I think Ivanka has his password. I'm not sure.
I don't know. That sounds more like a Donald tweet.
This one does. This one does, yes. Crime infested and breeding concept. What? I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a strange. That's an interesting word to use there. Breeding concept. So he's already tweeting this morning. Mike Pompeo met with Kim Jong-un in North Korea last week, he says. That would be after Easter. Meeting went very smoothly and a good relationship was formed. Details of summit are being worked out now. Denuclearization will be a great thing for the world, but also for North Korea. Well, for the North Korean people, yes. For Kim Jong-un, not so sure. We'll have to see. Yeah. Whether he agrees, but
well, that's the risk that he's taking. Once people in the North really get all of this much more exposure to the South, they'll realize what a bozo he's been. And
well, they've already been exposed a lot to the Korean dramas
right.
that the second king does not approve of.
Maybe
because
they're playing a role, though, in some way.
I don't know. I don't know, but. Of course, the second king says that these South Korean dramas are like a pornography for women because they present a false reality, false love, false love relationship. And he actually seems to, if I may analyze a bit, seems to put a lot of the cause of or the Han mother's fall on South Korean dramas.
Yeah, I've heard him say that.
Yes.
That there was an addiction there.
Addiction.
Hours and hours a day
yes.
watching Korean dramas.
Yes.
Longing that the Messiah would be more of a beta male.
Yes.
This caused the wedge, a big separation between her and father.
So I don't know. Maybe North Korean women are dreaming of the day they can come and have access to all these beta males in South Korea. I don't know. And he's also mocking Stormy Daniels' sketch of a non-existent man, quote, non-existent, unquote, behind alleged 2011 attack.
Well, this is certainly a big revival of her career. When you should say, I mean, book deals, and
book deals.
I think she's the centerfold of a certain magazine.
Oh, really? I haven't checked.
Who wants to?
Okay. Yeah, well, maybe so, yes.
You know, I think her career was very flat, and
Yes.
now it's experiencing a revival.
Everybody's writing a book. Everybody's got to write a book.
Everybody's on a book tour.
Yes.
How's Hillary doing?
She's still waiting for her turn to come back. Yes, she's still waiting for her turn to come back. But we are living in very crazy times, and things are happening very quickly. In South Korea too, there's all sorts of domestic. Now, actually, Moon Jae-in is on the defensive because of some kind of a scandal. My wife was trying to brief me on it. It's kind of very, very complicated. Something to do with somebody paying money for people to write comments and how this actually influenced the impeachment of the former president. And anyway, there are all sorts of domestic things going on. But the thing that Father's really interested in right now, I'm pretty convinced, is the coming unification of the Korean Peninsula. And it feels like that time has come. The time is coming now for South Korea and North Korea to come together one way or another.
So do you think Father would, he would certainly support a military strike?
Well, he would
imagine.
He would support the unification of Korea by one means or another.
Centered on probably the United States.
Yes. Well, of course, the unification he would want the unification to occur centered on God's word and a society where there is religious freedom, a society that would be conducive to the establishment of the eternal nation, a society that would provide an environment for the second king to carry out his mission. That would be Father's wish, I'm sure.
Yeah, so when you think about the battle between North and South Korea, it's really China versus the United States.
Yes, well, yes.
To a large extent. So, I mean, if the North was to take the upper hand, then China would really be in control, and you would have all the lack of freedom, the lack of religious freedom, lack of free speech, and no foundation for the Cheongguk Constitution. Whereas the United States takes the upper hand, then at least there's that opportunity for all of that to happen.
Yes. Let's see, can I squeeze in? Maybe not. I guess not. I was trying to find another quote of Father where he says that unification of Korea cannot happen except by him. Mm-hmm. That unification has to happen centering on Reverend Moon.
Not you.
Yes. So, very dangerous times. Like I say, if I were a member of the U.S. 8th Army right now, I would go ahead and start packing my bags, start taking some of those photographs off the wall and sending them back home to the U.S. or start sending some of maybe the winter clothing, send back to the U.S. I don't know if you'll need them, but I don't know if you'll be there for another winter.
Maybe not. Maybe they'll be going into the North and doing a secret operation.
But things are going to happen quickly, but I'm not sure if it's going to be, there may be a lot of sacrifice, unfortunately. All right, we've at the hour for us to leave and let people get on with their lives for the rest of the day. Thank you for tuning in, and let's pray that God's will can be done. I know that God wants peace. I know that Father told us that God hates war more than anything. But in the course of providence, God has seen the necessity for armed conflict and war at times, because more than anything, God wants to bring about the salvation of all humanity. And sometimes God has found that war was necessary. So we pray that God's will can be done, and that we can remain united with the God's lineage of the second king, and to fulfill his will. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Greg, for coming in. And God bless, Godspeed, and may his kingdom come.